Hey, Will, I never thought I'd ask you this, but can you make your head a little bigger?
Oh, you mean ego-wise or with the scale here?
Yes. Well, we've already
Because
lost Brian.
mean,
We've already lost Brian.
I, I'm fine to pump myself up. I think I'm really talented at podcasting.
I love
Look
it.
at
I
look
love
up.
it. Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. We are episode 21, so we've broken the double 10, so that's pretty awesome. We have a nice guest today. We'll introduce him in a second, but Will, we have banter. We
do. I remember celebrating my 21st, but it was a lot different than this.
Oh, we can drink.
on the show.
I never even thought of that.
It's going straight downhill. Sorry,
So Will,
Brian. Yes.
Surprise for you.
I can't remember how excited I'm supposed to react.
What's the surprise? That's perfect level. We have a new home.
We do.
Look
at that. That is it's funny that you brought that to the show today. I was just recently speaking with my wife, and she was like, "Do you and John ever think about changing the background?" I swear to you, she brought that up. And here you are. That looks snazzy.
Yeah. Do you want to see some options that we were looking at?
That is a leading question. Yes.
We have two other options. This is our industrial look. And this is, I think it's a little too fabulous, but I asked Marley to go out on a ledge, and she did. And then we settled. Wow. I think we settled on this. So, Will, welcome to our new home.
This is snazzy. Brian, I'm so glad you're here with us on the debut of a background I didn't know was coming.
Yeah, thank you. And that wasn't even needed in order to lure me to your podcast, the promise of a new background.
There you go. All right. Well,
there's so many wonderful things that drew you in. Yeah, I understand.
Let's get into our banter just a little bit quicker. Will, yes. I don't have a green screen today because I'm traveling and I'm in a hotel. So how do I look?
A little fuzzy.
Catch
not
John
quite
doing
as
something
sharp,
right.
But your audio is great.
Thank you.
Yes,
that's good. And then let's get to our friend Brian in a second. I will just say we had our first cancellation due to illness. Graham, I hope you're feeling better. And Brian has dutifully filled in for us. But before we get to our guests, we have to introduce ourselves. I'm John Lane.
I am Will Barfield.
And we are a work in progress. I think you're lagging.
Fabulous new logo.
We'll work on that. Mm-hmm. Brian, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And you can see we have a little lag because, as I said, I'm in a hotel. But why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers? No, sure. What do we call what are they? Whippers? Wipsters?
Wipsters?
I'll agree to anything.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Well, our guests, our audience are Wipsters. So, Brian, introduce yourself to our Wipsters.
Wipsters, I am Brian Calnon, a career in brand management and marketing, and really have been primarily B2C most of my career, but lately a little more involved in the healthcare space, and that's what I'm actually doing now in these days. I'm in healthcare, so looking forward to the discussion today and hope that the Wipsters get what they look for every time they tune in.
Well, they'll definitely get what they paid for.
There you go.
So I have to make a terrible dad joke, and it's very dated. But I'm just going to say, wait, is this the right one? Calgon, you're soaking in it. No, that's the wrong one.
Calgon, take me away.
Take me away.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
You never heard that as a kid, I'm sure.
0 times. 0.
0 times. Good. Okay. Well,
thanks for bringing back familiar yet painful memories.
Are you triggered?
I'm triggered a little, and that probably didn't even show up in my survey results.
No, it didn't.
Well, here you go, Brian. Imagine yourself as a 7-year-old kid and look at my last name, and you have some fun with that. So understood. We share that pain.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Well, moving on from the personal therapy session, and just say, folks who watch our Wipsters know that we talk about leadership traits under stress, and the way we identify those leadership traits is using the OAD platform. It's super easy, it's powerful, very cost effective, and that produces the strengths and weaknesses, which we of course call superpowers and kryptonite. And now I'll start introducing our friend Brian. So this is our OAD leadership matrix, and I'll just point out that Brian is a socially oriented builder. Will, do you like my professional box?
I do. I've noticed you've updated the slides.
Yes.
Some of them. Sharp. So he's a socially oriented generalist.
That's exactly right. And this is how Brian looks, or how his traits come out. We'll ask him the question. I've been talking too much.
Oh, there's no too much with you, John. Brian, how does it feel to have yourself reduced to a 2-dimensional data table?
It's not a bad feeling. Not going to lie to you. I think the simpler you attempt to define me, the better. So I'm all for it.
Great. Well, let's just talk about how we get there. So, Brian, we look at, on the pod mostly, we look at the top 4 constructs: AEPD, assertiveness, extroversion, patience, and detail orientation. Brian's most dominant trait is his extroversion, followed by his assertiveness, and then his P for patience and detail orientation are both subordinate traits. This means Brian operates with a lot of urgency. He's a people pleaser, people pleaser. When he's in the room, you know he's there, and it's always a treat to have him in the room. So that's our friend Brian, our guest Brian, and then this is when Will takes over.
Yes, thank you, John. So these are the generic traits, Brian, that OAD is going to assign to anyone who ends up in the builder, negotiator segment, that quadrant on that chart. Of the superpowers that are listed there that are generally applicable to those who are like you, is there one that stands out, as really well suited, or that you want to talk about?
Yeah, they're all good ones. To me, the one that resonates the most would be the driving one. And when I think about it, I think I'm naturally oriented to just get things done and drive, but I also think I've worked for companies where that kind of aggressive, stay on task, get results kind of expectation was somewhat prevalent in the organization. So if you're wired that way and then you're reinforced with an organization that has some urgency and might be competitive, it's best to keep that focus. It served me well in many roles. So that's the one that resonated the most to me.
Well, I'm going to hit this slide, but I'm going to hit a point that you just made real quick, John. Agency, working in agency, I mean, you got to have drive. And that's not a job, that's a lifestyle. And, for someone who's recruited people into the agency world, if that's naturally part of who you are, that's a good match, because if you don't have that kind of get up and go get it, agency will chew you up.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity sometimes because you're attempting to anticipate a client's needs and move forward with things when you might not have clarity around direction.
Right.
You'd rather go forward than be stagnant, I guess, the way we look at it.
And I'll just say one of the traits that come with people in the builder quadrant is that they are comfortable with ambiguity. They're also typically comfortable with taking some risks. So just like you said, you can't always wait for your client to tell you exactly. Frankly, you're not doing your client a favor if you only do what
That's right.
exactly they say. But that proactiveness is super important in that life.
Agreed.
Great transition, John. Generic kryptonite, shadow side, pressure's on, stress is high, things get tough. Which one of these do you believe, Brian, most leaps out at you?
I think I can be guilty a little bit on the pleasing others side. And I don't know if it's pleasing as much as maybe being overly concerned about what others may perceive about me. And so it's not necessarily I'm trying to make them happy, but it's almost like, too much reminding of capability to somebody who probably just wants the project to move forward and doesn't want the commentary of all the great, work and insights that you had. So I can be guilty of that one. That's definitely resonates with me.
Great. So this is our wrap up, right? We look at our generic superpowers and kryptonite. This is a transition slide and leads us into, the self-analysis that you did when you looked at your results and were communicating with John in preparation for the show. You
Sure.
made some personal notes, right? So we're on the superpowers side, happiness, rainbows, bunnies, clouds, and things. When all is great, let's talk about your superpowers. What makes Brian awesome?
Well, thank you for referring to it as awesome. I didn't have to be a pleaser to you to get the awesome word out, so that helps me. For me, I've always been very good at not only having diverse idea generation, but doing it very quickly. And in part, it's reinforced by that second bullet. And what started out, in all honesty, my curiosity, I think, in the corporate world started out as more of fear of getting something wrong. So I'd rather collect more information and make a decision because I was inexperienced early in my career. So I'd rather get more information than less. And I did it long enough where it just kind of became a more consistent approach of mine. And it's helped me a lot in understanding, what's really going on in any situation. I think a lot of people are hesitant to ask a lot of questions because one takeaway could be, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Why is he asking so many questions?
Right.
But I think when you get more comfortable with yourself and more mature in your career, you recognize you really do need answers to things versus making assumptions, which in most cases turn out to be wrong in a lot of companies. So those two traits have served me very well. And I think, as John alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, I'm very comfortable communicating. I was a debater for many years in high school and in college. I understand how to be persuasive. And it helps if you want to be persuasive and you've asked enough questions to get enough answers so that what you're saying can be persuasive because it's accurate and compelling, not just because you're delivering it in a great way. There's substance behind the delivery, I guess is what I'd say in that case.
Got it. No, well said. And I made a reference earlier when we were looking at the generic to the driving piece being, a great fit for the agency world. And given, what you've done for the bulk of your career, in order to be successful in that realm, you've got to be a fountain of ideas.
That's right.
You have to be able to ask a ton of questions and be able to consume information at a fire hose rate, and then be persuasive when you really believe that your idea or your message or the goal that you're trying to take your client towards is the right one. Sometimes they may not see it the way you do or may not agree, and you got to get them there.
Right. I think too, you can also tell a lot about somebody's interests and intelligence in how they answer a question. How much depth do they give you? how easily and comfortable are they answering. And you can tell when someone's kind of fudging things a little bit, and that's helpful. Even if they don't answer your direct question, you
Right.
might not turn to that person as a resource in the future.
Right.
You get an answer, maybe, with their failure to answer.
That's right. That's right.
Right. That tells you
That's why I give John only yes, no answers.
that is true.
You want to remain a mystery.
I'm like, John, you get one word, Chief.
Well, yeah. Will remains a mystery to me. But Will, we have a surprise.
More?
Look,
Oh,
kryptonite.
look at that.
Huh?
Same notes.
Didn't see that one coming.
That's really interesting. And really the first time that we've been in a situation, John, where on the superpowers and kryptonite that we've kind of analyzed it through the same lens. Talk to me about, why we landed here, Brian, and why you would apply the same notes and the same logic to the strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and it really is to me, I like this process because it did kind of force me to think about a lot of things that frankly I hadn't thought about most of my career. And what occurred corporate brainstorming, part of the benefit, the objective of that is getting a group to interact and participate as a cohesive unit, right? How well can you work together? How can you play off of each other in terms of idea generation? So it's been a negative at times in my career when I've been a little too overbearing on contributing ideas. And it's more of it's a negative because it's putting a focus on me as an individual generating ideas.
Right.
And in a lot of times, if I'm doing it too aggressively, it's making other people feel hesitant to submit their own idea. Either I shared something that they had as an idea themselves, I just happened to get it out faster, or it was a good idea and the other person thought, well, my idea might be kind of crappy, I'm not going to say anything. Well, that doesn't help the group.
Yeah.
No.
So I think you have to learn understand the bigger intent and objective of some of these engagements and interactions. And back to what I was describing earlier, the people pleasing kind of notion. I don't have to win every brainstorming, right? I don't have to have the greatest number of ideas. And similarly with the curiosity, as we were talking about earlier, you ask too many questions, a lot of times it unnerves people, right? They'd rather just get their information out and not have to answer questions. And so I've had to learn a lot of balance between, dominating a room too much and not allowing others to participate, or recognizing that it's more important that the group builds ideas together than an individual like me throws out a fully formed idea that no one else has to build on. Well, that doesn't help the group. And companies are success or failures based on a lot of different people figuring out how to work together.
The social entities.
In a good way.
Yeah.
And I early on in my career, I wasn't always aware of that. I was too busy trying to be competitive against the other brand managers, the other marketing people, and win the room for a meeting when that doesn't always, it's not always interpreted that way by people around me in the room. It's perhaps a good way to look at it.
And Will, if I could say something during your segment,
Do it.
It's that having done 500-600 OAD assessments with folks, there's a couple of quadrants of people who are often reluctant to speak. And if there is somebody who is filling the room with speaking, A, that can let them off the hook, or B, that can crowd out their ideas. And so finding ways to bring everyone's ideas to the table, that to me, I know we're talking about kryptonite, but that's a superpower by recognizing that and then not taking up all that oxygen and leaving it for others and encouraging others to take that oxygen. That's very good for group dynamics.
Yeah, well, one of the things that John and I talked about, before this podcast was I wished that my MBA program would have some component around what you guys are doing, so that as you go out into the workforce, and in my case, I went to grad school, I'd worked about 10 years, so I had a little more experience than other people who normally go into it. But I found in my career that the challenges I had in the workplace had little to nothing to do with my capability and acumen in marketing and business. It was, how do I work with other people in an effective way? And do I know what I'm coming across as and how to manage it? I had no idea. And if I had known some of the insights you guys shared with me probably much earlier in my career, I think it would have taken a different trajectory, for different reasons. So
That's a great segue there too, Brian, talking about the next slide and career. So, my understanding, you were talking about, where you've gone and focusing in the health sector. You stepped into a new role very recently.
No, Will, you're right. I'm on day 4 of a very new role. And so I think
Wow.
where I find this most applicable is I'm at the period of time where I'm making first impressions. So I'm making first impressions with the leadership team who haven't met me, all of them, and the rank and file employees. So these insights have really helped me get off to a much better start by being more aware of how I may come across and how I may want to handle it. And it's really hard to change someone's opinion after a first impression. And I want to get it right. And this helps a lot.
100%.
Well, like you said, serendipitous.
Right.
I'm glad we could do that. Guys, executive producer John says we have to move on. Brian, who do you think could handle the withering interrogation of Mr. Will Barfield?
The withering interrogation. There's a guy I know. His name is Frank Vignone. He's a sales leader for somebody I worked for. He's got a significant level of experience. I think he's managed a number of different large sales organizations.
Perfect.
A lot of those gone change. Might have some good insights.
Frank, you're going to hear from us soon. And we have to bid adieu. This was a great episode. Thank you, Brian. I'm John Lane.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Happy
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are a work in progress. Oh, I blew that. Well,
Yes,
let's try it again. And we are
a work
in
progress.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Bye.
Goodbye. Awesome background.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.